Welcome on board, everybody. It's an exciting time. Thank you all for joining. Thank you, everybody. This is going to be fun. Let's go, people. All right. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for joining our session. This is going to be one of those sessions, live interviews, getting our folks ready and getting them ready for some of the real deal happening right now. So thank you for being part of it. We'll keep it as quick and brief and effective as possible. And let's have fun together, people. This is going to be a blast, really. So, with us today, we have two of our folks that would be participating in today's interview drill. It's a time we come together just to kind of showcase ourselves and maximize every one of our team as much as possible. So we have a couple of questions we'll just throw out there, try and see how we can help our folks to prepare for interviews, right? So nothing is guaranteed. So we are not of the illusion you do and a mock and automatically everything just works out for you. We hope that's the case, but that doesn't always happen. But one thing we know for sure is proper preparation prevents poor performance. So it's always in our self interest to always prepare. It's a smart strategy all the time. So I'm going to start with Mars today. Let me add Mars. Hey, Mars, what's up? How are you?
I'm doing well. Good afternoon,
Good
everybody.
afternoon. Thank you for joining. And I'm going to start with your role. So tell me a little bit about that role before we jump into it and share it with the larger team. What's the role about? What and how did you get to this point?
Basically, the recruiter reached out to me, and it's a company that I want a compliance analyst, and they asked the question. One of the questions they asked was, "Have you had direct ownership of compliance control? You
Okay.
have executed." That's one of the questions they asked.
Okay, excellent. And what we're going to do today, Mars, is I already typed those questions and kind of put some best practice answers, use combination of AI, and I will now talk about them in real time. And for those of our audiences on the call, also, just let's go together on this journey, okay? And one thing I would always share with us as a team is, the key is always we need to show some measure of confidence, right? So the confidence will give us that reasonable assurance that at the minimum, even if we don't know everything, we are willing to say, I've not done it that way before, but this is what I have done. So people would understand. Let me give an example. If you tell me that you are using ISO 27001 framework and I've never worked on it, I can easily twist it and say, well, I've worked on NIST framework and just put my strength there. The reality is that your hiring manager knows that if you worked on one framework, you can easily replicate the skills on other frameworks. So it's not a big deal. So let's take the first one. I have the questions already typed for you. So let's talk about them real quick. These are the questions. So, and our audiences can see some of the questions, but I'll just tell you what I think. Some of them were generated, but I will just say, let me just use my own thinking and thought process also. If somebody asks me, have you worked with frameworks such as NIST framework, ISO, and others? Absolutely yes. For those of you that are part of our community already, we've used those frameworks to map different security controls. And one of the scenarios we typically would give, and I would recommend this is a good one for you, is to say one of your current or your past role, the CEO or the CISO or the VP of operation needed to understand the gaps in terms of their security controls and be able to determine areas of opportunity to improve those controls. And your role was to map the different framework or one of them, let's say ISO or NIST framework, to all your controls and come up with the gaps noted in those controls. Not just the gap noted, you also came up with action plan. You came up with maturity model to say these are the areas that we think there are opportunities to grow in general. So the final product was you came up with a gap assessment report. You came up with action plan that is practicable for the CEO or CISO to implement immediately. You even broke it further to say 30 days action plan, 60 days action plan, 120 action plan. Also, you integrated model effort, meaning the effort to actually implement those plans. So it might be, minor tasks, major tasks, or extensive effort needed. You clarify that in front of your leadership, and that is immediate value there. Does that make sense, Mars?
Yes, that makes sense.
Okay, so that's the way I would approach that question. Okay, let's jump to the next one. Do you have the ability to discuss in an interview setting what you did with the framework and how you use them professionally? Absolutely. In our case, those framework led to decision making for your leadership, right? So it's not really just because you went to map the framework. You use the framework to identify gaps, areas of opportunity within your business, and it became an actionable step for you to provide guidance to your leadership. If those of us that are part of our program, you remember we always emphasize at the end of the day, make sure we have action plan. Beside the action plan, we need to tell our folks the effort model, how long it will take to implement it. Because think about it, ladies and gentlemen, it's like you resuming a new role as a leader. The only way to know what are the gaps in your environment is if somebody goes in to independently do an assessment for you of the environment. You can never know all the whole issue, right? And think about it, because you are in leadership, you're likely going to report to the board or the C-level executive those issues. So it's important and vital to have an ammunition, a weapon to say, I've done an assessment, look at the gaps and look at the strategy for us to implement this gap. Most board will tell you, "Give us your 30 days action plan, give us your 60-day action plan, give us your 90 days action." So it's not really it's serious business really. So the only way to get to that conclusion is if there's an assessment done. So I would go with that approach really personally. We can leverage different scenario, but that's a good approach that people can relate with. All right, let's go to the next one, Mars. Um, Okay, somebody said, "Does your resume include the execution of IT SOX controls?" Now, yes, in your case, and if you remember well, one of the key controls we've always worked on with SOX, there are three key controls. One, logical access control that includes new user testing, terminated user testing, transfer user testing, and general system parameters. So new user, we are saying, okay, all the access granted to the new users, the access is appropriate as per their job function. Second, terminated user, if you are terminated in the system, the HR will provide us the list of those termination, and we make sure those terminated users are not active in any of our application, database, network, infrastructure, cloud, IoT, whatever devices you use. The second one is typically change management, right? We are saying whatever change you make at the application, database, network, operating system, infrastructure, cloud, whatever your organization uses, are those change authorized, approved, tested before it's deployed to production? Is there proper segregation of duties? And are your changes monitored within the environment? Those are the key controls there, really. Then we have IT operations, typically job schedule and batch processing. All the jobs out there, do we have the appropriate users monitoring and approving those jobs? And the other one is backup and recovery. It's not enough to back up. Do we have a recovery testing done, or do we have a backup plan in the first place? We are checking for that also. Then problem and incident management, we are saying for all the problem, the incidents we have, is there a proper way to ensure they were timely resolved as per the service level agreement? Those are the key controls from a SOX point of view. And that's what I would leverage generally. Do you have questions there?
Was it like the kind of message you sent me the last time? I think those message included most of all of what you just mentioned
Absolutely.
right
It's
now.
the same thing. It's the same
That
thing
has to do
because,
with socks too.
yeah. So
Okay.
SOX is part of it. You will see the testing step there that has SOX. So
Mhm.
definitely leverage that. Absolutely. All right. The fourth one says, "Are you ready to execute controls and document evidence of the control for audit?" Yes. Most of the controls, if you're an IT auditor or a SOX auditor, ultimately, primarily, you need to document your testing. The goal of documentation is at the end of the day, an independent person can go in to reperform the same thing and come to the same conclusion. Period. That's it. Right? So it means it's not just testing. If a novice picks up your work plan, they can follow your step, reperform the same test, and come to the same conclusion. That's really what it is. So it means you have to show me that you have evidences, you have documentation to buttress whatever you are doing. That's really the whole gist about it. So I would recommend make sure you go and check the document on IT general control testing, and I may share that later in our larger group as a reminder for you. So use that as a guide for yourself. Okay. All right. Let's go to the final one. This is the fifth question that you sent to me, and so that the next person can come up real quick. Are you ready to dive into the details of executing control and becoming an expert? Blah, blah. So the bottom line in this is to say execution of the controls is the testing of your control. That's what it is, really, at the end of the day. So if somebody asks you, tell me, walk me through how you do new terminated user testing. Straight to the point. In terminated user testing, I ensure I collect a list of terminated users from naturally HR. Then from HR list, I compare with all of the active users in the application database network in scope, right? If it's in scope, then we test and it's no rocket science, ladies and gentlemen. All I'm saying is that, hey, you are no longer with my company. Are you still active in the system? That's it. Now, one of the common things I've seen, just to get you ready, okay? Many times the administrators would deactivate you in the network, but you are still active in the application database. Technically, you can't do anything because network access has been removed, so you don't have access to do anything. However, what about if somebody has access to your user ID and password? Can they potentially use a backdoor to log in as you to access the application at the back end? That's something we have to ask. So even though technically access has been removed at the network level, yes, you would admit, perfect, you still violated our policy, so it's still going to be an issue. The impact may not be as grave as if it was a network access. So check the policy and procedure. Most people will tell you within 24 hours of being terminated, whatever the policy states is what you will use. So that's the bottom line. Question so far.
Mm, I think you pretty much explained it clearly, and
Excellent.
I've seen a video with that effect before, and what the way you just said it kind of made it more clearer.
Excellent. Excellent. And you know what? Just go shine, put in the best, and I wish you all the best, brother. I have one more person. Is not available, but I will walk through what he has. Hopefully, he will listen to the recording. But for you all, at least we can, at least, and thank you, Mas. Appreciate it. You're awesome.
Thank you so
Um,
much for
yeah, thank you, sir.
inviting me.
No problem. Thank you. All right. So the next person I'm going to bring is not available, but I'll walk through what he has. So, at the end of the day, I want to make sure our community can benefit from it. That's all I care about, really. So let's take the first one. So what he has is, a role that talks about issue management. And let's talk about this real quick. At the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, every organization would always have issues they've documented. It's on you and I to figure out ways to ensure those issues are resolved in a timely manner. Because some of the issues could be high impact issue. Some of them can be critical issue, right? So if there's a malware, a virus that is going global to different environment, then in my organization, we want to make sure we deal with that right now because it's a big issue, right? So we need to know how to escalate issues depending on the issues, right? There should be metrics to tell us how to effectively manage and report these issues, right? We also have service level agreement. So all of us should know that at the minimum, service level agreement, it's typically a contract to say, if I have certain issue, this is how long it will take you, sir, ma'am, as my vendor, to resolve those issues. As simple as that. Integration and effectiveness. So every environment would figure out what tools they use to manage their issue. It's always a smart idea to automate this process. Why? Because think about it. If you're a big organization, we're talking of you could have tons of issues every day. Nobody can do it manually. We cannot use email, it will be a disaster. So there are tools people use to track issues. So you might have heard of ServiceNow ticketing system. You might have heard of Jira. Those are some tools out there. In the past, people have used there's a popular one there, and what's the name of that one? Remedy ticketing tool. Whatever tool they use is not a big deal. The bottom line is that are those issues resolved in a timely manner, and are they mapping to the service level agreement. Very important. Okay. So then another thing is that constantly we are evaluating those fixes for the issues, the remediation. Are we constantly resolving issue or it's bringing more issues? So we need to think about that too all the time at the end of the day. Also, are we engaging our stakeholders constantly? The stakeholders must also have their buy-in. When you're resolving issues, do you get feedback from them? Do they give you are those issues satisfactory? That's one of the reasons when you call a service provider, your carrier on the phone, they would always send you a survey to make sure they are resolving the issue. Sometimes they think they've resolved the issue, but it's leading to further issues. So those are the things people need to resolve within the organization also. All right, let's go to the next one. Risk management, we can all agree at the minimum, right? For the risk management, we have to constantly think of, you know, activities around. It's not just saying risk management. Risk assessment comes in big time all the time for us, right? We are going to constantly do risk assessment, right? At the end of the day, we think about, okay, what is the impact of this on our business in total? So risk assessment is something we have to continuously do as an organization at every point in time, irrespective of your business. It's something we have no choice but to do to be successful and to make our cyber resilience meaningful in the long term. Um, of course, we have to think about risk identification, assess the risk, monitor the risk, and check the impact of the risk as much as possible. The same thing here, we're thinking about mitigation evaluation. So, what are the risks identified within your business? We need to also check how the mitigation, the fixes are done and evaluate them. Is it actually fixing the issue or is leading to more problems for us as an organization, right? So those are things we have to think about all the time. Some of these are repetitive, so I'll skip it, like SLA implementation, metric enhancement, integration. They are very similar in nature, so I'll skip those ones. Data security and governance. One big area here is for data security, security assessment is a big deal. So we need to constantly conduct data security assessment, right? This company is DocuSign in this case, right? Based on industry best practice. One of the things this week I hope to send out to our community is some of the best practice documentation, like for data security assessment, best practices we need to do, IAM assessment, which is identity and access management assessment, some of the best practice. Think about IAM as simple as this. Fundamentally, I'm saying, how do I grant access to you? And how do we potentially revoke access, change access in the midst also? Those are the big areas I'm thinking about with IAM at all times. Inventory management, one big area here is always remember asset management, inventory management. At the end of the day, if we don't have a database or a list of our assets, then how do you monitor potential breach or compromise? It's not possible to monitor it. So it's very essential to have a process around inventory management. Threat identification, there should be a way to constantly gather data for threat intelligence within our organization. Many times it's either internal sources, external sources like Department of Homeland Security, critical infrastructure agency, CISA. A lot of bodies, professional bodies, would constantly barrage you with daily leading threats. So put that in your own threat intelligence tools to constantly figure out if you are susceptible to any major threat. Then data flow mapping, it's not enough to just have data. Many times, if I do an assessment in your organization, I'll ask you, can I have your network flow, your data flow? Data flow is telling me how is your data moving within your organization. Simple as that. There are three elements within data: data at rest, data in transit, and data in use. Data at rest, I'm keeping it, I'm not doing anything in the database. Data in transit, you are sending data through encryption. Data in use, I'm processing the data, just like you opening your file right now. That is data in use. How do I ensure the integrity of that data as you work on it? Those are the key things there, right? Reporting is evergreen. Reporting is going to be an ongoing thing for us. Reporting would focus mostly on management at the end of the day, right? Then finally, response and advisory. This is saying at every continuous point, there should be some element of monitoring within the process at the end of the day. So that is really the quick summary of those roles in general. Let me pause if some of you have questions. Let me see. Some people are typing questions. All right. I can see Anna, excellent. Ogbas, Funke, see gold. Thank you, everybody. You all are awesome. I can see you all. If you post, I'll notice you on the chat. But let me see if anyone have one or two questions. Then we wrap it up. We typically do this, ladies and gentlemen, when our folks have interviews coming, give us 48 hours notice, preferably. Sometimes it might be urgent. We try to accommodate you. Now, this is my recommendation. Most times, no matter how smart you and I are, it's always nice to have someone, a different person, to kind of gauge us and give us some feedback based on what they think about those roles. And just keep practicing, get your confidence together, and we genuinely believe in you as a community. Go bring the offer, keep trying. Sometimes it might not work the way you feel, but that don't feel bad, don't feel embarrassed at all. It's okay. The person that loses in our opinion in our community is if you quit, right? If you don't quit, the universe always open for us. No matter how smart you are, including myself, sometimes things will not work the way we want, but never quit. Just keep trying, give it your best, and I wish you Godspeed. And thank you, everybody, for being part of the chat today. Hope to see you all soon. Thank you. Talk soon, everybody.